Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this online event where we're going to be unpacking AI and its uses in international development. My name is Romina Bandura. I'm a senior fellow at the Project on Prosperity and Development here at CSIS, and I have the pleasure to be moderating this important discussion today. So before I introduce our speakers, we know that technology is impacting our daily lives. One such technology that holds promise to help humanity is artificial intelligence, or AI. AI is poised to reshape economic development in ways comparable to the transformative influence of cell phones and the internet. Although AI holds promise, it also, as a tool, carries risks. This includes ethical considerations in the use of this technology, biases inherited in the training algorithms, also security and privacy concerns, and as well as the amounts of energy that are required to keep the data centers for AI. So these issues also have to be taken into consideration when we approach AI. Our discussion today will analyze how international organizations and development agencies can harness the potential of AI while mitigating its risks and ensuring robust safeguards. We will explore the strategies and principles necessary to navigate this transformative landscape responsibly. To unpack some of these issues, we have convened an excellent group of experts in this field. We have Arturo Muente Kunigami from the Inter-American Development Bank. Arturo is a modernization of the state lead specialist. Welcome, Arturo. We also have Christopher Parker. He is a research professor and associate professor of information technology and analytics in the analytics department of the Kogod School of Business in American University. And he also teaches at UVA. Welcome, Christopher, or Professor Parker. Rafael Romeo is president and CEO of DevTech Systems, and he's also a senior associate of the Project on Prosperity and Development here at CSIS. So thank you, Rafael, for being here today. And last but not least, Emily Springer. She is an inclusive AI and algorithmic literacy consultant at Techno-Socio Advisory. So welcome all of you, and thank you for participating in this important discussion today. So let me start with a very general question to educate our audience. So there's a lot of hype about AI these days, but what is AI exactly, and how can it be used in this international development field? So I'm sorry, it's a very general question, but I want to turn to each one of you to answer, how you see AI and how you see AI impacting development. So maybe I'll start with Rafael, and then ask the same question to the rest of the panelists. So Rafael, the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you, Romina, and thank you for organizing this panel, which is outstanding. So I think the easiest way for me to describe what AI is just to give an example of how we use it. So we are, we work in development throughout the world, and what this has done is open up a massive toolbox. A lot of our work is economics based. So we already had a lot of analytical tools that we would implement, but now we have kind of what used to be called data mining. And so, for example, we cannot escape a lot of what they call analytics. So trying to find answers to the very large volume of data that is out there has been facilitated by these tools. And so you still need to get good data. And so one thing that we might do on the topic of economic growth and sort of how we do development is to try to understand events that destroy development outcomes. And those can often be economic crises, natural disasters, or in one particular case that we're looking at would be wars or other sort of civic upsetting socioeconomic events, whether it be the deposing a government or massive strikes, protests, whatever. And so in what DevTech is doing now to work on this issue is to go in, and the first step we do, sort of the first phase, is to get the best data we can. And that doesn't mean everything is data. So that's the first thing I would say. Everything is data. What's really limiting data now is compute. So in the old days, you needed what was called machine readable data to really do anything. So you need something that can fit on a spreadsheet, and or at least is machine readable sort of numbers or very clean text. The audio that we're having in this meeting is data. You can record it, transcribe it, that would become data. Everything is data. Visual is data. And so really what you need is good data. You need experts to help you point to good sources throughout the world that will give you powerful data that is insightful and not garbage, because AI has helped but not solved the garbage in, garbage out problem. So we may, for example, gather data, as we do from a number of countries around the world, on local news feeds, on what's happening. Are there strikes? Are there protests? Are there arrests? These sorts of things. And the second phase, we'll start with what we're called foundational models. In selection models, or you could use an LLM. We use, in this particular case, we use Roberta, which is a natural language processing model. And we start reading in these data feeds and we try to identify events. And so this is an exercise where you're using vast amounts of data that are coming in. This would have been inconceivable before, let's say 2017, 2018. You needed to have these foundational models to drive this, or you would have to have literally thousands of people reading newspapers every day to figure out what's going on in countries around the world. So we have solved that problem. We can identify events. Then in a third phase, you would say, okay, well, what is driving this event? And then you may do, topic modeling or some other thing where you have yet another set of models that come in and try to classify these events. And so in phase one, you get data on what is going on in some country. In phase two, you may identify, oh, there's a case of corruption. In phase three, you may identify that the corruption is related to investments by the PRC or something like that. And so you've driven the whole process, but you've driven it at scale, and you're using data sources that are really hard. The work is now moving closer and closer to getting good data rather than having to pay money to have people read. You're really eliminating a lot of the legwork insofar as you can. And so really you need to focus on a second set of issues, which is accuracy and how well you're able to do this and to use these tools. And we can have a broader discussion on what you're able to do there, but you're able to tackle, the drivers of development in a non-linear way. And so that example, I think, encapsulates what we're trying to do and how we're trying to apply these things. And we can talk more.
Thank you. Thank you, Rafael. So Arturo, let me turn to you. How do you see, AI as a tool, and how are you applying that to international development?
Well, thank you, Romina. I want to start by thanking CSIS for the invitation to this panel. So just to complement what Rafael was saying, at the end of the day, the AI, it's basically as a book I read the other day, Prediction Machines, says it's basically a very good prediction tool, right? It has dropped the cost and the resources required for predictions, and it's making much better and more precise predictions. That being said, it's just that. The fact that you can take that to the exponential level and then predict what the next word would come in a sentence, and then you have Gen AI. It's huge, but behind it, it's prediction. And as he very well pointed out, It's a technology that basically depends on data, and hence good quality data is a necessary condition for good quality predictions. So that's something that we are also keen on emphasizing. There's no magic black box there. It's basically garbage in, garbage out. Software, code, and programmers. I don't want to minimize the impact of it, but at the end of the day, that's the recipe. So in terms of what we're doing, what we've seen is this sort of pendulum, where we started probably with a more aggressive take on AI, and AI being the tool that will help governments, countries, people, companies, etc. That was then, of course, faced with I'd say a reaction in terms of ethics. You mentioned it at the beginning, the risks in terms of being more responsible adoption. We were probably a little bit part of that. We started with in the IDB with our FAIRLAC program back in 2019, pre-pandemic, when many of these initial machine learning algorithms, there was no Gen AI back then, were being used in the social sector. So we were very sort of apprehensive and just raising flags in terms of the potential risks. However, I think that not only us, but the whole maybe multilateral sort of sector was too cautious, again, trying to balance that initial sort of pendulum towards the push for the adoption of AI. But I think that it was probably misunderstood. I've seen countries that take it as a risk avoidance advice, and of course, risk avoidance is not what you want to do, because to avoid the risk, you just don't use it. What you want is risk mitigation, and for risk mitigation, you want to understand the risks. You want to understand when those risks are high, and then you can then think about when you can apply it without many friction, when you want to be very cautious about applying it, and when you just don't want to apply it, which is something similar to what the I think the European Union is thinking on with their new legislation around AI. So there are two, and just to answer your question, and with this I'll stop. But there are two kind of levels on what we're doing in terms of adoption. One is, of course, using it ourselves or helping our client countries use it for specific use cases, again, social sector, but also in infrastructure, in transport, in energy, in water, detecting leaks, being more smart about when to deploy the networks, where to deploy them, where to do more research and deploy the infrastructure. So that's something that we're seeing ever more. Many countries are starting to use that in our operations. But then there's also the sort of the higher level in terms of AI policies, national AI strategies, regulation, which is something that is starting to appear, and that we think will probably still be sort of something that we will see in the coming months, in terms of countries wanting to act with regards to AI. A year ago, maybe even less, I've met countries saying, we're not ready for AI. And of course, our response was, well, too bad, because AI is ready for you. So, they need to start stepping up. And it's something that I think countries are starting to realize. And that's something that we've seen in our dialogue.
Thank you, Arturo. I now want to turn to Emily.
Great. Thanks so much, Hermina. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. So I want to continue adding to the comments that Arturo and Rafael have given. And I just want to take a moment and actually let you know that I am a sociologist, which means that I come at it from a different angle, and you're going to see that reflected in my comments today. So I'm going to work on constantly bringing the human in. And in a lot of my work, I have had the opportunity to work with smallholder farmers in Ethiopia. And so also sort of bringing bring in that very much on the ground, who are often sort of the participants, beneficiaries, if you will, of different development initiatives. So I first started working explicitly in AI 4 years ago when I was doing a postdoc at Arizona State University. And I was looking at sort of this like hype dialogue around AI and thinking, what and how are we going to use this in international development? Which to me, international development is one of the hardest circumstances out there. You're working in a resource poor environment. You're working in a data poor environment. You're working with people across cultures, across languages, across different epistemologies. And so if we can find ways to really think about all of those differences and complexities and find a way to sort of use AI in ways that work for those people and for developmental aims, we will have done something that not even the private sector can do right now. Not even big tech has figured that out. So we have a really neat opportunity to actually go and do thought leadership. Romina, referring to your first question, sort of what is AI? I think of AI, it's not just a computer science problem. It is a socio-technical construction, which means that there are all these ways in which our human values, human society, data points, what data gets collected, who actually gets measured, which realities get represented in data, all of that is sort of bound up in these data sets. So AI is solving often everyday puzzles through mathematical equations. So we're taking mathematical equations, we are training them on data to ascertain the relationship between all the features that exist, or variables, if you will, in that data set. So we do that, we train a model to understand, to sort of determine the mathematical relationship between all the variables in that data. This is where the human comes in. And I work often in social development. To me, we get economic development when we have thriving citizens who have jobs, who go vote. And so I'm not explicitly working in economic development, but I'm working in all the things that I would say happen sort of ahead of that. And then really, so if we're, and let me pause and also just say, I'm not often looking at sort of AI tools that are using satellite data. I'm looking at AI tools that are meant to make allocative decisions. Who should get a mortgage? Who should get to go to college? Who should get fertilizer? Things like that, that are really sort of at that allocative social person level. So we have in this mathematical equation, it's been trained to understand relationship between variables. And then the human comes in when you take a single case of a person, you take their experiences, you take their data points, and you plug that into this mathematical equation, as Arturo said, to get a prediction. And so that means that it's really important to think about individual data or individual people and where they sit on sort of a bell curve in relationship to all that data that algorithm was trained on. Because if you exist at the margins of where of the data set that algorithm was trained on, you might not have a high accuracy prediction. And so we really want to be thinking, where are people that we are trying to help and serve through AI tools? Where are they in relationship to our training data? I also want to encourage people, I'm hearing garbage in, garbage out, and I completely agree. But I want to add, I often say inequalities in, inequalities out. And that is the piece that I think we are not talking enough about, because it comes down to, if we want to use this and we want to use it responsibly, we need to make sure that we are doing a lot of risk mitigation, as Arturo fantastically sort of raised. And Romina, I'll just close with sort of this impact in international development. I would always encourage us to ask, impact for whom? There are lots of ways. I work with UNFPA on technology facilitated gender-based violence. And there's a lot of evidence to say that women and girls are having very different relationships to social media. And that also has to do with the way that algorithms work and the way that algorithms are trained, and what protections and risk mitigation processes are built into tech by design for different users. So always ask impact for whom. And then I get really excited about examples in the international development sector where we're providing new access to things. So in Ethiopia, the World Bank did a project where they basically created a non-collateralized loan because women don't often have access to land to put up to get a loan. And so they initiated psychometric testing for women to be able to offer a new loan product. And so in that way, AI is being used to expand services to people who want loans, who want to run small businesses and get set up. And so those are the use cases I get really excited about. So I'll end there for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you for bringing that human dimension because, as you know, I mentioned in the beginning, it's a tool, but it's a tool used for, by humans for humans. So lastly, Christopher, Professor, can you react to all these comments and add on, your thoughts?
Absolutely. Thank you, Romina, again, from all of us for bringing us out today. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more on everything we've heard. I think humanity is something that we do often miss out. So thank you, Emily. That a lot of the work I do is in the space of what I call inclusive development, inclusive growth. I'm an operations management professor. I am not an economist, but a lot of what I do is sort of in this development economics space. And so I like sort of seeing things and getting more at the tactical level. And what I'm seeing is people who are using AI, we've had several different descriptions of what it is. It's repeated matrix multiplication that's really good at picking out patterns, right?
Yeah.
And people are starting to realize that can help us take the cost of figuring out what policies might work down. So for example, historically what you might have to do if you wanted to, Raphael was bringing this up, if you wanted to track what is going on in the world, you'd have to have an army of RAs that speak an army of different languages, figuring out and following news articles. Now you can throw things into an LLM, into a ChatGPT, whatever, and out will come a summary in whatever language you want, independent of what language you put in. So I've seen people doing this mostly with Spanish, trying to summarize articles about accidents, crashes that were happening in, I believe it was Colombia. You're also seeing people using very sophisticated satellite imagery to try and figure out light exposure. This has been going on for a while, but light exposure to measure economic development, right? Rather than going around and sending people out to measure in person some kind of survey-based quality data. So driving that cost down from our point of view is super helpful because now we can do more. We can do more tests. We can do more things to figure out what is helping and what is not. And we can also, because that cost is coming down, we can start to figure out who is being left behind, who's in the margins of that normal distribution, as Emily put it, that is not actually being brought along with this average. But it's also helping out in a lot of other ways, more than just estimating. I think it's also making it possible to do analyses that we wouldn't be able to do before. So I do a lot of work in the mobile money space. So with M-Pesa, if you've heard of that, but basically for people who work in a cash society but don't want to have a lot of cash on hand or need to send cash long distances and don't have good access to banks, they put the money onto essentially their mobile money account, their phone account, and they text the money to their family, to their friends, whatever, right? So that's difficult. There's independent contractors who are running these little, basically small micro banks, and they have to make decisions with their own cash, and it's not an easy problem. It is actually a very difficult problem. But we're getting better and better at predicting what they should do and trying to figure out how can we get them to follow our recommendations, to trust us, to believe that we are not doing something that's only in our best interest. And I think we're just going to get better and better at that when we get better and better forecasting models and better ways of understanding in different contexts how do you build trust with people who who haven't had this type of relationship with data, who haven't had this type of relationship with a large company or a large group of academics trying to provide them with useful information. But I think it's hopeful, because I think there's a lot of good people working out there. And I think, you have a lot of people who are thinking about how do we make sure we do this in a way that brings everybody along and doesn't just create this bifurcation of individuals, the haves and the have-nots, but sort of drags everybody up as much as we can.
So we'll talk about, the risks shortly, and this bifurcation, but I wanted to drill down a little bit more on, how can we use AI in our daily, operations in our organizations. I know we've heard use cases in, in the social sector, in democracy and governance. It can be used for health, ag. And I've heard from you estimating, a predictive tool, a tool to analyze things that we couldn't do before. But it also, AI can also help us in our daily work. So, simplifying things, texts, and others. What kind of skills do we need, in the international development field to use AI? I presume, there's a kind of a rainbow of skills. Or do we have to all be, AI professionals, geeks, to use the tool? So can you, each of you, educate us a little bit on, how can we use it internally in our operations, and what type of staff and skills do we need to use AI? So maybe I'll start again with Rafael.
Sure. So that's a good question. We have a range of tools that we use in our company, and I'll give you some examples of things where we have seen absolute game changers. And so one of our clients' goals is localization, and to get kind of the voices of the local community to be reflected in the work that we do. And this is a huge priority, because you don't want to be an outsider coming into a development environment and just impose or create some unsustainable solution that will just disappear the minute you leave. And so we have found that these tools are absolute marvels, and the gains in productivity are huge when you're able to channel the talent, the significant talent that is available in some of these places. When you overcome the language barrier, you overcome and it's not just language, in spoken language. They can email you in professional standard English, and it's perfect because they ran it through the free version of ChatGPT. And so the copy editing capabilities, we're working right now, I'm actually in Rabat, where we have the potential, this is early application, we have the potential to reach people with disabilities, and particularly the deaf and the hard of hearing community, where there's an application that was developed very famously in India by a young student that can begin to read sign language. So you can translate now from sign to written language and so on. And this is, I think, has a ways to go, but you could just imagine the potential there. You can also develop tools, and I think this would be so those are, I think, skills that if you develop them, you can deploy them with relatively low skill populations, or at least not skilled in IT. To not say that they're low skilled, they're not computer geeks, as you would say, but they can use these applications. If you do get a computer geek, then you can create, spin up a Mistral model and chat with a set of documents, and you can air gap it to make sure that the data doesn't get out. And we do a little bit of that. You can create your own GPT. And in fact, I think that's a drop-down menu now on ChatGPT, where it's drawing from a corpus of documents that you provide to help specialize the GPT. So those things are, I think, becoming increasingly available to the lower end of the skill range, and certainly, across the field of knowledge management, and on the language barrier. they're critical. This is also true for students where they can just ask questions and I taught, and I know Chris does this as well, a computer science class recently. He should speak more to this, but I encourage the students to use ChatGPT because it's so effective in teaching them to code. So those are a few examples that I think are examples of technology reaching people and really unlocking productivity gains that are massive. And in development contexts, they are really large jumps in productivity that we have observed.
Thank you, Rafael. Arturo, how are how are your employees in IDB using AI to, improve efficiencies or others? What type of skills do you see that, they need? So what are your thoughts?
So we are also, like I said, not only helping our client counterparts, client countries with their use cases for AI, we're also using AI internally. We are exploring different tools, a lot of them, to be honest, related to Gen AI in terms of helping us research our own publications, research what's out there, knowledge products, be more sort of effective or efficient, if you want, in terms of finding information, finding different indicators, data that's out there. We have a wealth of knowledge, in the bank, in our publications and elsewhere. So that's something that we're very keen on leveraging AI to use that. In terms of skills, we have an internal, our IT department developed an internal sort of Gen AI crash course, very basic, but at least to allow you to understand what's behind it, that there's no, magic behind it. And that also allows you to see what are some biases or some risks, some, hallucinations and where they come from, so that you can understand sometimes that, some of the responses that you may get, you have to sometimes double check them or just be sure that it's not necessarily as exhaustive as you would want or think. So just be a beware kind of course. No I don't think it's necessary for them to know, under the hood what's in there in terms of what algorithms or what methods, what different methodologies they're using, but just to understand at a basic level what's happening so that they are a little more sort of informed in terms of what they're getting whenever they ask a question. Prompting is also something that as you interact with Gen AI becomes an issue. So, that crash course also has some basic sort of tales on prompting, but it's still, I wouldn't say it's in production yet, so it's something that we're testing, but the idea is to make it available to everyone, and the course is going to be mandatory soon. So that's, I think the most sort of impactful and broad sort of use of AI that we're seeing right now.
Thank you. Emily, I'll turn to you for your thoughts on this issue.
Great, thanks very much. I think this is a fantastic question. I almost think it's the question. So I'll start first with sort of the skills that I think people need, and then I'll move into sort of how I think it can increase efficiency and within operations. So I'm a sociologist. I don't know how to code. I've been trained in multiple regression, all that good stuff. I think we have a really big misunderstanding around who belongs at the AI table. I think it's predominantly been thought of as the realm of data scientists and computer scientists. When I was doing my PhD, I took a break and I worked for a Microsoft partner, and I was a business analyst, and I was building out customer relationship management software systems for enterprise clients in the United States. And that taught me, that like direct tech sector experience taught me the power of a cross-functional team and how we can all come together, bring our different skill sets in to build tech solutions that actually meet the needs of workers while meeting the needs of companies, business units within those companies, and serving their customers and clients. And so when I combined that experience with my international development consulting, which is predominantly for USAID contractors, and I started to think, are people ready for AI? And so to me, the number one thing that's happening here is that when people don't understand what AI is, they don't think they have a spot at that table. And so to me, if we're going to do this right, we're going to do it well, and we're going to do it responsibly, we need to make sure that people in international development organizations understand how AI works from a conceptual level so that they know their role to play on a cross-functional team on an AI build. So for me, working previously as a business analyst, I can see how the technical teams on an agricultural development project, say, the sort of leads in different areas, market systems, you've got ag, like, animal fattening, you have all these different technical areas. And then you often have a gender and social inclusion advisor. All of those people, if they come to understand how AI works from a conceptual perspective, they are the ones to give the specifications for what an AI solution should do once deployed in the field. They are the ones who know the culture, who are able to think about the nuances, who know the data, who know the inequalities in that data, to be able to pass that and work collaboratively with the data scientist or the computer scientist to be able to say, hey, here are some of the things we might need to be thinking about. So to me, like building up the skill set of people to partake in a cross-functional team and to contribute productively is extremely important. So I train people right now. I run AI literacy boot camps for social impact professionals, and I focus all on sort of concepts, terms, so that they're ready to go and play that role. So that's near and dear to my heart. It's sort of my passion project. And I would also say, I think there's also a confidence issue. So when we think about data scientists and computer scientists, absolutely everybody has their own skill set. But I think that in the hierarchy of knowledges, quantitative knowledge is up at the top. And it is intimidating for other people to be at the table. And I think if we're going to do this well, we need to really acknowledge that and invite everybody in and have those discussions to ensure that people are participating in really articulating what a strong build looks like in any given local situation. With respect to operational sort of efficiencies, the number one thing that I keep hearing is that organizations are using ChatGPT, large language models, essentially to write proposals or to help write quarterly reports or annual reports. If you've worked for a contractor, you know that you spend a lot of time doing those items. And so finding ways to decrease that, absolutely fantastic. I am on board with. The thing that I don't hear people talking about is that meanwhile, there is a lot of evidence that demonstrates that large language models like ChatGPT reproduce bias. And they do it in such subtle and minute ways that you will never know unless you are testing for it. So there's a plethora of research coming out that says ChatGPT, if you ask for recommendations for salaries, now I would say that's a really bad use. That's a really bad prompt to put in. And so there's almost some, like, it's very dangerous. A person who is confident in AI but doesn't know how it works is a pretty dangerous person at this moment in history. We need staff to slow down and critique the output that's coming out from these models. But what I'm not hearing is people talking about solving those sort of minute, subtle biases as they go about incorporating ChatGPT into their everyday work life. Now, for more technical folks, you might say, oh, we did RAG, we trained it on our internal documents. I've worked in gender inclusion for over a decade, and I can tell you, we are still working on trying to incorporate gender meaningfully into proposals, into project documents. So what's the existing corpus to train on? It doesn't have gender in it. And so there are ways in which we're going to get all this sort of reproduction of small biases in ways that we won't know is happening. And that's a discussion that I haven't actually heard about. People don't seem to be having that discussion. I will also say, I think in terms of efficiency gains, as Arturo mentioned earlier, compliance, sort of regulation is just starting to happen, but compliance costs money. And so I think, this sort of operational efficiencies, we need to get really ready to think about how much things actually cost. It's really easy to deploy AI as a plug and play and have it not sort of that it could easily reproduce biases. It's not well thought out. It's not responsible. But compliance costs money. And so I think what we're going to see is we need to be thinking really carefully about reallocating finances to make sure that as a sector, we have a mandate to do no harm. Our thresholds are really different than private sector. So it's one thing for big tech to release a product and have a whole bunch of research come out that says this is biased. That's really different in our sector of social impact. We have literal mandates not to do harm. And so I think we need to get really serious, not necessarily that we need to be doing compliance, like right now, the NIST, Biden's executive order, all the NIST stuff, that's all voluntary. We might not have a reason to be literally saying we have to comply with EU AI Act, but almost every international development use case in my world of social development is classified as high risk. All the education, all the sort of banking, the loans, the financial decision making, hiring, all of those processes, those are classified as high risk. We need to be talking about this as a sector if we're going to do AI responsibly. And so I'd say that is going to require our investment, and we should do it in order to be able to say that we are using AI responsibly for social impact and international development purposes.
We'll talk about this in a little bit, but I wanted to give Professor Parker a chance to also react to this issue about the use of AI and the type of skills. I mean, your customers are if I may say that, are students, young generation. So how are you seeing the use of AI in academia?
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be teaching students, and I've taught supply chain analytics, supply chain management design. I've taught Python classes. I've taught point and click analytics classes, lots of Excel skills, all sorts of stuff up and down the skill level. The rainbow, I think, is Romina, what you called it. I like that term. The interesting thing for me is that we do need a team that has different levels of skills. So for one of our projects, we transcribe audio, and we do this with 4 different transcription models, and we compare them because some of them are better at some things, and we want to use one and not the other. And but I don't need somebody who is a full stack, software engineer with a PhD, full professor to listen to audio files, right? But I do need somebody who understands why we need this, what their role is, why it's important to get it right as we go through. And I do need a full stack developer, right? I do need that for some projects. So we need the whole gambit. The interesting piece for me is that when the cost, the difficulty of learning, of ramping up the coding curve comes down, more people are starting to go in that. And so, Raphael taught a class at American University on Python programming, and in that class, leveraged ChatGPT to get people to sort of get up the curve quickly. And I think we're seeing that can be helpful. It has this cost of maybe being more error prone, but it can be helpful to speed people up the curve and then teach them to debug, teach them to find out why did it throw an error there? What is going on here? Robert Caraway at Darden also has a fantastic class where he does something similar, but the entire class is thinking about how did a human interject a number or a decision? What kind of hidden decisions are there in code that cut away the edges of your data? What does that mean? Who is involved in that? So the class is about SQL and about data visualization and about mining of data, but it's really about understanding the decisions that we make and how does that change the outcomes of our data analysis. So I think that's just something that we're seeing a lot more, is trying to train the next generation to not just implement the code, but understand what decisions you or your team or the person who wrote it 10 years ago made, and what that impact that might have, to sort of question that going forward. And one thing that we teach our students quite a bit is that AI is fantastic, but there is a massive amount of value in your everyday work in robotic process automation. All of the things that you do every single day that take up a little bit of time here and a little bit of time there, the ability to automate those is just, will add tremendous value to your life. And one place I think AI is helping in RPA is you're now getting the ability to have AI create some of the flows for your robotic process automation. So Microsoft has a great product called Flow, Microsoft Flow, or Automate, or something like that. I'm pretty sure it's Microsoft Flow. And it's basically a no-code system. You go in and you create this little thing that says, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. And it's sort of clunky at times, but it does the job. Well, now they've integrated their Copilot AI in to help you improve that system. So now people can say, this is kind of what I want to do, and chat with Copilot, and it will create the robotic process automation for them and free them up to do things like questioning, why are we doing this and why are we doing that? So that's where we're trying to get at things from the Darden, teaching the MBA students, what is the next level of AI? It's understanding it, thinking about where is it falling down, and really making sure that the next generation of leaders are asking the right questions.
Thank you, Professor. So let me now turn a little bit onto some of the issues that we also discussed at the beginning, which are the risks in AI and the challenges related to AI. We talked a lot about use cases, opportunities, but I also heard, from Emily, inequality. If you work with technology, these days, there's this dystopian view that, robots and AI together will probably, create, massive layoffs and joblessness. So I wanted to ask each one of you if you could give me one of your favorite risks that you like to hate regarding AI. Just one. I know there's a lot, but I'm cognizant on time, and we can go for hours. But I'm going to start with Rafael. What is your favorite risk in AI, and how do you mitigate it?
Well, I'll give you my favorite risk. I don't know how to mitigate it because I think we failed. My favorite risk is the risk of ignoring the need for light touch regulation, because we are motivated by a consortium of, let's say, large incumbents to the industry, attorneys, and the regulatory profession that resides in places like Washington and New York. And those three have a very real economic incentive to collude to overregulate industries. And you could look at a simple example like the comparison of the cost of building a bullet train in California versus in France versus in China. And those are very practical examples. This country cannot build a bullet train. We cannot. We have failed. Whereas in France, which is not exactly the home of laissez-faire, ironically, they can build bullet trains, and they do so successfully. And in China, they build bullet trains for 2% of the cost. So in this, as Arturo has pointed out, this AI is coming. It may not be coming here, but it's coming. And so we do as a community, and this is very real for Washington, D.C., because we may be the problem. We need to understand this technology and address the very real problems of bias and no system is perfect, but also be cognizant of two things. One is the counterfactual of no technology, or of technology falling into the hands of competitors, whether they be economic competitors or military or whoever. And the second is that there are voices that are silent at this table, and those voices are the middle class who didn't get a job, the person who doesn't get language translation, or the person who doesn't get help learning to code, to give you the three examples that I've given. So that how to strike that balance is very important to me. And I do fear that Washington, D.C. is going to try to regulate this in a way that they did not regulate the internet. And sure, we have, internet pornography, we have also have sorts of scams, but we also have a call on Zoom right now. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Arturo, what is your favorite risk?
I wouldn't call it favorite. I'm gonna give two very short. So I come from the data world. So for me, this whole idea of having quality data, as you understand it, in the most broad way, as Emily pointed out, that's comprehensive, that's actually relevant to the people you're trying to benefit with the policies you're making, quality data. AI won't increase the quality of the data. It's the other way around. So you need high quality data. And the other one is, and I hope I'm not stealing Emily's one, but it's the impact on equity. So we do believe that there's a risk that AI adoption may exacerbate the divide between and within countries rather than reduce it. Now, it has the potential to reduce it, but and it has to do with how smart policies are. But that's a risk that sometimes I truly just get haunted by.
Emily, what are your views?
Well, Artur gave me a great segue.
Just
Thank you.
one, Emily.
Yeah, I think there's this discussion around sort of AI as an existential threat. I would say that people of color, minoritized individuals, AI is a threat to them today. And I think we should be paying attention to that risk. So over the last several decades in this country, we've been making a lot of progress on laws around gender, race, ableism, religion, sexualities. Right now, I think the biggest risk is that in order to keep those, to keep that progress towards sort of social goals, SDGs, we're going to have to fight harder. Because if we start deploying AI products more broadly, we're going to get that minute reproduction of inequality that Arturo spoke to at the higher level. In order to mitigate that, I absolutely think we can. I think there are so many neat ways we can use AI. But if there are policymakers or funders listening to this talk, I would say we have to start funding what it takes to build responsible AI. We are not, we're funding the build of the solution. We are not funding the holistic look at what it takes to think really carefully about involving stakeholders, involving end users. We're not funding building out AI governance processes at the same time that we're funding building the solution. And so I'd really like to see movement in that area. And I think that can really help mitigate what is currently and already is huge risks for minoritized communities. Thanks.
And just to add that, include these minorities or women and others into the field and into the the data gathering, the processing. I read a statistic that women are really underrepresented in this field and also in STEM. So with that, I'll turn to Professor Parker. So what is your favorite risk that you like to hate in AI?
Yeah, I think mine. I'll stay away from the ones that have been said because I agree with all of them, and I'll move on to my next favorite one, which is AI can do things that move the needle. Sometimes it's incremental, sometimes it's huge. And what I worry is that sometimes we see something that does move the needle, and it moves the needle for everybody in a positive direction, but it helps some people more than it helps others. And because that has created this split, we end up not using it. And the example I'm thinking of, I won't name names, but a large tech company has a product, internal product. This internal product lets people use their phone camera, point it at something on their skin, and get a guesstimate as to whether or not this is something they should go see a doctor about. Is this a skin cancer? Unsurprisingly, this is much better at doing this with a Caucasian skin color than it is people of color, for a variety of reasons, which we don't have to dive into, but training data is one of them, right? However, it lowers the cost so much that early detection of skin cancer has gone up for all groups in their estimations. But it hasn't been, I won't tell you who it is. It hasn't been rolled out because they're worried about, well, this created something that's like 98% accurate for one group and 80% accurate for another group, right? Letting the pursuit of perfection get in the way of progress, I think can cause some problems. We need to recognize that moving us in the right direction is beneficial. And yes, we should 100% solve this equity problem in this specific example, but not let us hang back because of inequality.
So with that, I also wanted to, talk about the issue that Rafael raised about the governance of AI. So, and it's a little bit related to what you were saying, Professor. How should governments approach the use of AI in this field or in general? So I don't know if you have specific views. I know we have just maybe 5 minutes left, and I'm sorry, we're running out of time, but this has been a fascinating conversation. So I wanted to ask all of you, like, what should governments do on regulating AI or not? Rafael?
Well, I'll just be very quick because I know we don't have time. I think they need to find a way to move the regulation into an adversarial review process where you really do have a counterbalance to the incentive to use regulation as a weapon to capture the market. Regulatory capture is a very real thing. And the ability of incumbents to team with the legal regulatory framework and box out innovation is huge. The ability and the inability of the process to recognize that, as Chris said, I'm going to give you an example. If we could triple the income of poor people in the United States, double the income of the middle class, and raise the income of the upper 10% by 100%, maybe triple the middle class and quadruple the lower class, would we not do that? It would exacerbate inequality, but would we not do that? I think we would. And so the absence of progress, the absence of access, the people who tend to suffer the most are the marginalized. And so that adversarial review process is what I think is needed. I'll stop there.
Arturo, what are your thoughts?
I think it starts by understanding what it is. But I think it implies the flow that we've had in this session. You know, what it is, what are the opportunities, what are the risks, and then what do we do? So you know, I don't know if that was your plan, Romina, but I think it's pretty much what I would say governments need to do. I was actually answering something along those lines. You need to understand its correlations. It's not causality. So what does that imply in terms of policy making? What does that imply in terms of where you can use it and where you shouldn't? So I think that there's a level of risk tolerance that countries will need to find themselves, but they need to at least acknowledge that there's a risk and that they need to mitigate it. There is a huge opportunity, and I don't want that to be dismissed. And something that we didn't get to talk upon was the role of the private sector, which is huge, not only in terms of existing offers, usually in developing countries from abroad, but developing domestic AI companies or private sector that leverages it. along with local high quality data, is huge, the opportunity. So I think it all starts from just understanding it and getting yourself used to this, living with it, and then setting up for a level of risk that suits the country at the development stage that they are.
Thank you, Arturo, and thank you for bringing up the private sector. That was our other question that we had. I hope we can maybe touch a little bit on that. Emily, what's your view on regulating?
Yeah, looking at the time, I'll just say I do think we need to use regulation to raise the technical bar that AI products need to meet, given what has happened over the last 5 to 10 years with AI deployments coming out of the private sector. And certainly, I think every sort of legal protection that we've gained needs to be additionally protected. And I'd love to start seeing governmental subsidies to incentivize companies to be working on responsible AI solutions in the way that we sort of see like wind tower subsidies and investments in the wind and solar sectors. Over to you, Chris.
I would just say explainable AI. Sort of pushing for explainable AI, subsidizing explainable AI so that we can actually understand what decisions are being made and why are they being made would be useful, especially as we're trying to convince people who are maybe rightfully scared of AI to use it and to trust it.
Wonderful. One minute, can you just touch upon the private sector, the role of the private sector, if you very briefly, each one of you. Rafael?
I think the private sector and particular P3s are going to be pivotal. I don't know that government is going to sit by as the world's largest and most innovative companies invent AGI. So they're not going to sit there and let some young person in California invent a new god, so to speak, without them being somehow involved.
Arturo, you mentioned the synergy of big companies with companies in the global south. So can you tell us a little bit more about the private sector?
No, there's a huge opportunity for collaboration between government and the private sector. I don't think there's a scenario where AI flourishes in any country without private sector. That being said, you need those guardrails that are smart in terms of fostering and pushing and promoting that kind of opportunity for growth, and yet put those safeguards in terms of potential risk. So that, I think, is that equilibrium and that balancing is the key for a successful sort of private sector development on AI in any developing country.
Emily?
Yeah, I guess I would encourage everybody to think about who are the partners that come to the table. I think AI, fourth industrial age, everything is sort of up in the air. We are remaking relationships at this particular moment in history. And I would encourage everyone to think about bringing new and local actors to the table in partnerships so that at the same time that we're rolling this out, we are also building up capacity of local private actors in these different country-based ecosystems.
And Professor Parker, you have the last words.
So I would just say the way that we approach education is to try and have people understand that we're creating long-term value. We aren't just doing get-rich-quick schemes. And so sort of my viewpoint is the more people I can crank out of the Darden MBA program who can get into positions at these private companies that are thinking and having these conversations about, well, is this just something we're doing for the quarterly report, or is this actually going to create long-term value for the company and for society? The more that we can do that, the happier I will be.
Well, thank you, all the panelists, for this really fascinating discussion. And I also want to thank especially, DevTech Systems for partnering with CSIS. And, I hope everybody has a great day. And this has been really, really very illuminating discussion. So thank you and have a good day. you.